What looked like a straightforward projection in the latest mock drafts is actually revealing a much deeper conversation about where the New England Patriots are headed, and if you've been paying close attention, there's a real debate forming about what this team truly needs to prioritize with that 31st overall pick. We're about a month away from the draft, the Patriots are sitting with 9 total picks, and yet the direction still feels wide open depending on who you ask. Let's start with what's being projected. One of the biggest names in draft analysis has the Patriots going with wide receiver Casey Concepcion in the first round. A player coming off a strong season at Texas A&M, on paper, the reasoning makes sense. The Patriots already made a big move by signing Romeo Doubs due to a 4-year deal worth up to $80 million after moving on from Stephon Diggs, but the argument is that it still might not be enough to fully address the wide receiver position. Concepcion brings speed, explosiveness, and the ability to stretch the field for quarterback Drake Maye. He averaged 15.1 yards per catch last season and racked up 449 yards after the catch, showing he can turn short plays into big gains. There's also value in his versatility, contributing in the return game with 2 punt return touchdowns. At 5'11", 190 pounds, he fits the mold of a dynamic playmaker who can create separation and add a vertical threat to the offense. But here's where things get interesting, because not everyone is convinced this is the right move. When you look at the current roster, the Patriots already drafted Kyle Williams last year, a player with a very similar profile. Another speedy receiver, around the same size, with the same type of role, so the question becomes, are you really improving the offense by duplicating that skill set, or are you just adding redundancy? And then there's the concern that popped up recently. Concepcion underwent a knee scope described as routine and preventative. He's expected to be fully ready for rookie camp, but let's be honest, anytime you hear about a knee procedure right before the draft, it raises eyebrows. Is it truly nothing, or is it a risk you don't want to take with a first-round pick? Now compare that to another projection coming from Pro Football Focus, which has the Patriots selecting Denzel Boston, also a wide receiver, but a completely different type of player. Boston stands at 6'4", 209 pounds, and immediately brings something this offense has been missing for a long time. Size and physical presence on the outside, his production backs it up. He dropped just 3.1% of catchable passes and secured 76.9% of contested targets, which is a massive contrast to Concepcion's 7 drops last season. Over the past couple of years, Boston has been consistent, productive, and reliable, with double-digit touchdown potential and very few mistakes, even though his yards per catch are slightly lower. Hovering around the 13-yard mark, his ability to win contested balls changes the entire dynamic of the offense. And that's really the core of the debate. Do the Patriots want more speed, or do they finally want that big-bodied receiver who can go up and win at the highest point? Because right now, the offense is filled with solid pieces, but lacks that dominant presence. You've got Demario Douglas working the slot, Romeo Doubs doing a bit of everything, Keyshawn Boots stretching the field, but no true mismatch nightmare that forces defenses to adjust. There's even another name floating around in this conversation, Chris Bell out of Louisville, a 220-pound receiver who has shown steady improvement every single year. He's coming off an ACL injury, which adds risk, but his production, including a 17.1 yards per catch season, shows he can be a legitimate deep threat while also bringing physicality. So now you're looking at 3 very different options, all at the same position, all with different strengths and risks. A smaller explosive playmaker with some injury concern, a big reliable target with strong hands and consistency, and a physical receiver coming off a serious injury but trending upward. But here's the twist in all of this. There's a growing belief that the Patriots might not even go wide receiver at all in the first round. The biggest need on this team, according to many, is still at edge rusher. It's a position that's much harder to fix through trades, while wide receiver help can still be acquired through deals if the right opportunity comes up. So even with all this discussion around receivers, there's a real chance the Patriots pivot completely and address the defensive side of the ball instead, leaving this entire debate unresolved until later in the draft or through a trade. And that's what makes this situation so fascinating, because no matter which direction they go, it's going to say a lot about how this front office views the future of this roster and how they plan to build around Drake Maye moving forward. So let me ask you this. If you're sitting in that draft room and all 3 options are on the board, are you taking the explosive upside of Casey Concepcion, the size and reliability of Denzel Boston, or are you looking past wide receiver entirely and focusing on a bigger need? Because the more you dig into this, the more it feels like the Patriots are standing at a crossroads that goes beyond just one pick, and it's really about identity. What kind of offense are they trying to build around Drake Maye, and how quickly do they want to accelerate that process? If you lean towards someone like Casey Concepcion, you're betting on explosiveness. You're betting on separation, speed, and the ability to create chunk plays without needing perfect ball placement. That kind of player can make life easier for a young quarterback in certain situations, especially when plays break down. But at the same time, you're also accepting the overlap with what's already on the roster. You're essentially saying that doubling down on speed is more valuable than diversifying the skill set in your receiver room. Now, if you shift to Denzel Boston, the philosophy changes completely. You're giving Drake Maye a safety net, a 6 feet 4 inches target who can win contested catches, especially in tight windows, in the red zone on third downs. Those are the types of plays that extend drives and build confidence in a quarterback. It's not always about separation. Sometimes it's about trust. And right now, the Patriots don't really have that go-to physical presence who can consistently win those battles on the outside. And that's been a missing piece for a while. When you look at the structure of this offense, there are players who can do specific things well. But there isn't that one guy who forces defenses to adjust coverage every single snap. Boston has the potential to be that kind of player, not because he's the fastest, but because he changes the geometry of the field simply by being out there. Then there's Chris Bell, who almost feels like the middle ground in this entire conversation. Bigger than conception, more physical, capable of stretching the field, but with that ACL injury hanging over him. And that's where teams have to make tough decisions. Do you trust the medicals? Do you believe in the trajectory of the player enough to take that risk? Because if he returns to full form, you might be getting incredible value. But if not, you're spending a premium pick on uncertainty. And while all of this is happening, there's still that voice in the background getting louder, saying that none of these receivers might matter if the Patriots don't fix their pass rush. Because when you look at the roster as a whole, the edge position stands out as a much bigger long-term issue. You can scheme around limitations at wide receiver to some extent, but generating consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks is something you either have or you don't. And right now, the Patriots don't have enough of it. That's why there's a strong belief that even with all these wide receiver projections, the front office could completely pivot on draft night, especially if there's a run on defensive talent or if a top edge rusher unexpectedly falls to them at 31. In that scenario, passing on that opportunity for a wide receiver, even a talented one, might not make sense from a roster building perspective. And don't forget, this team has options beyond the draft. Trades are still on the table. We've already seen how one move around the league can shift the entire landscape and suddenly make receivers available that weren't before. If the Patriots believe they can address the position through a deal, it makes even more sense to prioritize a harder-to-fill need like edge rusher in the first round. So now you're looking at a situation where the Patriots have to balance immediate help, long-term upside, positional value, and risk all in one decision. And that decision is going to shape not just this season, but potentially the next few years of this rebuild. Because if they get it right, you're talking about accelerating the development of Drake Maye and giving this offense a real identity. But if they miss, especially in the first round, it sets everything back in a division that's not going to wait for you to catch up. That's why this pick feels bigger than it might look on the surface. It's not just about adding talent, it's about choosing a direction. So now it comes down to you. What direction should this team take? Should they finally go Elon on giving their quarterback a true weapon on the outside? Or should they stay disciplined, address the bigger need on defense, and trust that they can figure out the receiver position another way? And the reason this conversation is far from over is because the closer we get to draft night, the more variables start to stack up. And this is exactly where things can shift in a matter of minutes. What we're seeing right now in these projections is just a snapshot, but inside that Patriots front office, the board is constantly evolving based on new information, medical updates, private workouts, and how they truly grade each prospect behind closed doors. Take the situation with Casey Concepcion again. If the medical evaluations come back 100% clean and the team feels confident that the knee scope was nothing more than maintenance, his stock could stabilize or even rise again. Teams love speed, and there's no denying what he brings in terms of explosiveness. But if there's even the slightest concern internally, that could be enough for New England to pivot instantly, especially when you're talking about a first-round investment. On the other hand, Denzel Boston's profile is the type that tends to gain traction late in the process. Big receivers who produce efficiently limit mistakes. And when contested catches often become more appealing, the deeper teams dive into film. Coaches start imagining specific situations, red zone packages, third and long scenarios, and suddenly a player like Boston doesn't just look like a good option, he starts to look like a necessary one. And this is where fit becomes just as important as talent, because it's not only about who the best wide receiver is on paper, it's about who fits what the Patriots are trying to build offensively. If the vision is to give Drake Maye more margin for error, more forgiveness in tight windows, then a bigger target makes a lot of sense. If the focus is on creating separation and generating explosive plays after the catch, then a player like Concepcion fits that mold better. But there's still that underlying layer to all of this that can't be ignored, and that's how the board might fall before the Patriots are even on the clock. If there's a run on wide receivers early in the first round, suddenly the value at 31 could shift dramatically. Maybe the top options are gone, and now you're reaching instead of selecting. That's when teams start to adjust their strategy, either by trading down, targeting a different position, or capitalizing on a player who unexpectedly slips. And if that player happens to be an edge rusher graded significantly higher than anyone left at wide receiver, it becomes very hard to justify passing on that opportunity, especially when you consider how difficult it is to find impact pass rushers outside of the early rounds or through trades. That position carries a premium for a reason, and the Patriots know that. At the same time, there's always the possibility of movement. With 9 total picks, New England has flexibility. They can move up if there's a receiver they truly believe in, or move back and accumulate even more capital while still addressing their needs later. This isn't a team locked into one path, and that flexibility might end up being their biggest advantage. And let's not overlook how much internal development plays into this decision. The coaching staff might believe that players already on the roster, like the younger receivers, can take a step forward next season. If that's the case, it reduces the urgency to force a wide receiver pick in the first round and opens the door to focusing on other areas. So when you put all of this together, what seemed like a simple debate between a few wide receivers turns into a much bigger strategic decision. It's about timing, value, risk, and vision. It's about understanding where this roster is today and where it needs to be by the time Drake Maye fully hits his stride. And ultimately, it's about trust. Trust in your evaluations, trust in your development process, and trust that the move you make at 31 is the right one for the long term, not just the most exciting one in the moment. So now I want to hear from you again, especially after looking at the bigger picture. If you're making that call on draft night, are you sticking with wide receiver no matter what? Or are you adjusting based on how the board falls and taking the best player available, even if that means going defense? And if a surprise trade opportunity shows up, are you pulling the trigger or staying put and trusting your board? Because when you really step back and look at everything that's unfolding here, this isn't just about one draft pick anymore. It's about how aggressive the Patriots are, willing to be in shaping the next phase of this team, and that's where things could take a turn that not many people are fully expecting yet. There's always that moment during the draft where a team stops reacting and starts dictating. And New England has the capital to do exactly that. With 9 total picks, they're not boxed into sitting at 31 and simply taking what falls to them. They can move up if they identify a specific target, especially if they believe there's a clear gap between one receiver and the rest of the group. Imagine a scenario where Denzel Boston starts sliding into the mid-20s and the Patriots see him as the perfect fit for Drake Maye. A bigger body, reliable hands, red zone presence, someone who can immediately step in and command attention from defenses. That's the kind of situation where you package a couple of picks, move up a few spots, and secure your guy before another team does. On the flip side, if the board doesn't fall the way they want, moving back becomes just as valuable. If multiple teams are calling, looking to jump into the first round for a quarterback or a specific prospect, the Patriots could take advantage, trade down, add more assets, and still land a quality player at either wide receiver or edge rusher later. That's how you maximize value over the long run, especially